The apartment building at 1426 West Belmont Avenue, Chicago, had seen better days. It stood tall, its facade weathered and its windows like dark eyes staring into the soul of the city. I lived on the 4th floor in 4A and had always enjoyed the creaky charm of the old building, until the new tenant moved into 3B. My days were typically uneventful. I worked from home, surrounded by the comforting clutter of my small apartment. Mornings began with a hot cup of coffee, the bitter aroma filling the air as I settled into my desk. My job as a freelance writer kept me busy, but I found solace in the solitude and the steady rhythm of my keyboard. Evenings were my time to unwind. I'd curl up on the couch with a good book or binge-watch the latest series on Netflix. The building was usually quiet, save for the occasional footsteps echoing in the hallway or the distant hum of traffic outside. But that all changed when the new tenant moved into 3B. It started with a faint noise, barely audible over the hum of my computer. A scraping sound, like nails on a chalkboard, coming from the apartment below. At first, I dismissed it as the usual sounds of a settling building. But as the nights went on, the noises grew louder and more disturbing. Scratching, dragging, and occasionally, a faint whispering that seemed to call out my name. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just my imagination. But the sounds continued, gnawing at my nerves and invading my thoughts. Who was this new neighbor, and why did they only make noise at night? My curiosity grew with each passing day, and I knew I had to find out more about the mysterious tenant in 3B. The noises from 3B grew more persistent with each passing night. What began as a faint scratching soon escalated into loud thumps and dragging sounds, as if heavy furniture was being moved around. The whispering became more distinct, almost rhythmic, like a chant. I found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, straining to make sense of the disturbing sounds below. My curiosity quickly turned into anxiety. Sleep became elusive, my mind racing with questions and unsettling thoughts. Who was my new neighbor? What could they possibly be doing at such late hours? I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home, the once comforting walls now closing in on me with each night's chorus of strange noises. One morning, after another sleepless night, I decided I had to confront the situation head-on. I couldn't live with this constant dread. I mustered up the courage and went down to 3B, knocking firmly on the door. There was no answer. I knocked again, louder this time, but still nothing. The door stood silent and unyielding, as if mocking my efforts. Over the next few days, I made several more attempts to meet my elusive neighbor. I'd knock at different times, sometimes early in the morning, other times late at night. Each time, the result was the same: silence. I even waited in the hallway for hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever lived there. But no one ever came or went. My frustration and fear continued to grow. I began to feel like I was being watched, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up whenever I passed by 3B. The building's old walls seemed to close in around me, and every creak or groan in the structure felt like an ominous sign. My friends noticed the change in me, the dark circles under my eyes, and my jumpy demeanor. It wasn't long before I confided in my closest friend, a detective named Jake. Jake was skeptical at first, but he could see the toll the situation was taking on me. He promised to help, reassuring me with his calm, methodical approach. We decided to dig deeper into the history of the building and its tenants. Little did we know, the answers we sought would be more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. Jake had been my friend since college. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a sharp mind and a keen eye for details, he had a knack for solving mysteries that bordered on the uncanny. When I told him about the strange noises and my failed attempts to meet the tenant in 3B, he listened intently, his brow furrowing deeper with each unsettling detail I shared. "Look, it could be nothing," he said, his voice calm but serious. "But it sounds like it's driving you crazy. Let's see what we can find out." Jake started his investigation the very next day. He requested the building's records, searching for any information on the new tenant. What he found was puzzling. There was no official record of anyone moving into 3B recently. The last registered tenant had vacated months ago, And according to the building manager, the apartment should have been empty. That's odd, Jake muttered, showing me the empty lease record. But it doesn't mean much yet. Let's dig deeper. His next step was to interview the other residents. Most of them were either unaware of any new tenant or too preoccupied with their own lives to notice. However, an elderly lady on the second floor, Mrs. Henderson, provided a chilling piece of information. "I saw him once," she whispered, her voice trembling. "A tall man, always dressed in black. He only comes out at night. There's something not right about him." Jake's face grew grim as he noted her account. He decided to visit the local library to look into the building's history, hoping to uncover any clues about its past occupants. I tagged along, too anxious to stay in my apartment alone. We pored over old newspapers and public records, and what we found sent a shiver down my spine. Years ago, a series of mysterious disappearances had plagued the building. Tenants from different apartments had vanished without a trace, and each case had been marked by strange, unexplainable noises heard by the neighbors. The disappearances stopped abruptly, with the last known incident occurring in apartment 3B. "There's definitely something off here," Jake said, his voice tense. "I don't believe in ghosts, but this is something else." The more we uncovered, the more my fear grew. It was becoming clear that whoever or whatever was in 3B was not just an ordinary person. Jake decided to reach out to a few contacts in the police department, hoping they might have more recent information or unsolved cases that matched our findings. Late one evening, Jake called me with an update. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "I found something. Meet me at your place. And whatever you do, don't go near 3B." My heart pounded as I hung up the phone. I had trusted Jake with my fears, and now he was uncovering truths that I wasn't sure I was ready to face. As I waited for him, the building seemed more sinister than ever, the shadows lengthening and the air growing colder. Jake arrived at my apartment with a stack of files and a grave expression. He barely glanced at me as he spread the papers across my kitchen table, each document more unsettling than the last. "I talked to some people and pulled a few strings," he said, pointing to a yellowed newspaper clipping. "There's something you need to see." The article was about a string of disappearances dating back decades, all tied to various locations around Chicago. Each case bore eerie similarities. Strange noises reported by neighbors, tenants who vanished without a trace, and apartments that were later found empty, as if no one had ever lived there. The most chilling part was a grainy photo of a man in the background of one of the crime scenes. Dressed in black, his face obscured by shadows. "That's him?" I whispered, feeling a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "That's the man Mrs. Henderson described." Jake nodded, his face tense. I dug deeper and found that these incidents stopped for years, only to resurface recently. Each time, the man in black is linked to an unsolved case. "But who is he?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What does he want?" Jake took a deep breath. "I don't think he's human. Every record, every piece of evidence suggests he's something otherworldly. And he's always linked to apartment 3B. We decided to confront the neighbor that night, armed with what little we had. Jake's gun, a flashlight, and our sheer desperation for answers. As we approached 3B, the air grew thick with an oppressive silence. I felt a chill run down my spine as Jake knocked on the door, his hands steady despite the tension. The door creaked open slowly, revealing the man in black. His eyes were dark, empty voids that seemed to swallow the light. He smiled, a cold, unsettling curve of his lips that made my blood run cold. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice smooth and chilling. "We need to talk," Jake said, his tone firm. "About the noises, the disappearances. About who or what you really are." The man's smile widened, revealing sharp, unnaturally white teeth. "I see you've done your homework," he said, stepping aside to let us in. "Come in, then. Let's discuss." Reluctantly, we stepped into the dimly lit apartment. It was sparsely furnished, with a strange, almost ancient feel to it. The air was thick with an unidentifiable, metallic scent. "I've been expecting you," the man said, his voice echoing strangely in the room. "You see, I need something from you." My heart pounded in my chest. "What do you want?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your soul," he replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You see, I'm a collector. I feed on the essence of humans, their fears, their pain, their very being. And you, my dear, have such a vibrant soul." Before I could react, he moved with inhuman speed, his hand reaching out towards me. Jake fired his gun, the sound deafening in the confined space, but the bullets seemed to have no effect. The man laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that sent shivers down my spine. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light as he continued to advance, his presence overwhelming and terrifying. "You cannot harm me with your human weapons," he said, his voice now a low, rumbling growl. "I am beyond your understanding." Desperation took over. I grabbed a nearby chair and swung it at him, but it passed through his form as if he were made of smoke. Jake tried to tackle him, but he was thrown across the room with a flick of the man's wrist, crashing into the wall with a sickening thud. The man turned back to me, his eyes burning with a sinister hunger. "Now, it's time for you to join the others," he said, reaching out once more. In that moment, pure instinct kicked in. I grabbed a small mirror from a nearby table and thrust it towards him. The reflection seemed to catch him off guard, and he recoiled, his form flickering and distorting. "You think that will stop me?" he snarled, but I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Jake, regaining his footing, picked up on my cue. "Mirrors," he gasped. "They reflect his true nature. Use it." With renewed determination, I forced the mirror closer to him, and he screamed, a sound that reverberated through the walls. His form began to dissolve, swirling into a dark mist that was sucked into the reflective surface of the mirror. The apartment fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting as the man vanished completely. Jake and I stood there, shaken and exhausted, but alive. We knew the danger wasn't completely over, but we had faced it and survived. For now, that was enough. After the horrifying revelation of my neighbor's true nature, sleep became a distant memory. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside my window, sent chills down my spine. The mirror that had trapped the entity sat in the middle of my living room, covered with a thick blanket, a constant reminder of the nightmare I had faced. Jake stayed with me, refusing to leave me alone. He was convinced that the entity might return, and we needed to be prepared. We spent hours researching ancient texts and talking to paranormal experts, hoping to find a way to banish the creature for good. One night, as we were going over some old manuscripts, the lights flickered, the air grew cold, and an all-too-familiar whisper filled the room. "I'm not done with you yet," the voice hissed, sending a wave of terror through me. Jake grabbed his gun, and I reached for the mirror, my hands shaking. "We need to stay calm," he said, trying to steady my nerves. "Remember, the mirror is our only weapon." Suddenly, the blanket flew off the mirror, and the room plunged into darkness. The entity emerged, its form more menacing than before. Its eyes burned with a malevolent hunger, fixated on me. "You think you can trap me forever?" it growled, its voice a low rumble. "I will have your soul one way or another." Jake fired a shot, but the entity swatted the bullet away as if it were a mere insect. "You cannot stop me," it said, advancing towards me. Fear gripped me, but I knew I had to act. With every ounce of courage, I held the mirror up, aiming its reflective surface towards the creature. "You won't take me," I shouted, my voice trembling but determined. The entity recoiled, its form flickering. "Your soul is mine," it screamed, lunging towards me. In a desperate move, Jake tackled it from the side, giving me a clear shot. I thrust the mirror forward, capturing the creature's essence within its glass. The entity's scream echoed through the room as it was sucked back into the mirror, its form dissipating into a swirling mist. The apartment fell silent once more, the oppressive weight lifting as the entity vanished. We stood there, panting and shaken, but victorious. I wrapped the mirror in the blanket, ensuring it was securely covered. "We need to get rid of this," Jake said, his voice hoarse. "Somewhere it can't hurt anyone." The next day, we took the mirror to a remote location, burying it deep within the ground, far away from anyone who might accidentally release the creature. As we covered the makeshift grave, a sense of relief washed over me, but a lingering unease remained. Back at the apartment, life slowly returned to normal. The strange noises ceased, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. But every now and then, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if the entity's presence still lingered. Months passed, and the fear began to fade. Yet, on some nights, when the wind howled just right and the shadows seemed to dance on the walls, I'd hear a faint whisper, a chilling reminder of what lurked just beyond the veil of our reality. Enjoyed it? Give a like and spread the terror. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any scares. Join our dark community.